We are just 8 weeks away from the presidential election, and this week we've seen the clearest contrast yet between the two nominees. Voters are choosing between a man who mocks those who take the coronavirus seriously, who traffics in conspiracy theories, who has doubled down on telling his supporters to break the law and vote twice, and reportedly thinks members of the United States military are losers, versus Biden, a man who rejects everything Trump stands for, especially his treatment of the military.
It's a fake story. I've done more for the military than almost anybody else.
It's sick. It is deplorable. It is so un-American. It is so unpatriotic.
People that are in the dark shadows, they're people that are controlling the streets. We had somebody get on a plane from a certain city this weekend, and in the plane, it was almost completely loaded with thugs.
What in God's name are we doing? It's mortifying. It's embarrassing, and it's dangerous.
What you have to do is send in your early ballot and then go and make sure that ballot is tabulated or counted. And if it's not counted, vote.
He's a fraud.
The election comes down to who makes a better case for healing the country, with more than 6.2 million cases of COVID and more than 188,000 deaths. A jobs report that shows that while 1.4 million jobs were gained, at least 8.4% of the country is still unemployed. And Congress still hasn't come to an agreement over coronavirus aid. I'm joined now by Jason Johnson, professor of journalism and politics at Morgan State University, and Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large at The Bulwark. Charlie, I'm going to come to you first. Voting has begun. Early voting has now begun in North Carolina. They start very early. Mail balloting in the presidential election began Friday as North Carolina started sending out more than 600,000 ballots, more than 16 times the number that were sent out the same time 4 years ago. Should Donald Trump be concerned? Is the reason in your mind that he is now saying, no, vote twice, is that he may think he'd been too effective at getting his own supporters to distrust mail-in balloting, and now they're not going to use it, even though it would help him?
Well, it's always dangerous to get inside Donald Trump's mind, but I think it's fascinating that we found out this week that the Department of Homeland Security had prepared a briefing saying that it was Russian disinformation that the Russian goal was to sow disinformation about the integrity of our election, which is exactly what the president is doing. So, the president's goal, I think, is pretty clear here, which is to sow confusion, chaos, doubt. And I think that there's two main goals here. Number one is to make people think, well, this is complicated. Is my vote going to be lost? Is my vote going to be stolen? Perhaps to suppress the vote. As you point out, might even suppress his own vote. The second goal is to continue to lay the groundwork for challenging the legitimacy of this election. So it is interesting that the incumbent president of the United States is devoting so much of his energy to sowing doubt and confusion about the voting process.
Yeah, and as you say, Charlie, it is directly out of the playbook of Vladimir Putin, because as our intelligence services have said, that's what he's doing. But Jason, it's not just Trump that's doing it. It seems that William Barr is also on the Putin playbook. He seems to be also doing the same and stoking the same kind of disinformation that Russia wants to be stoked. Here he is talking about voter fraud.
Elections that have been held with mail have found substantial fraud and coercion. For example, we indicted someone in Texas, 1,700 ballots collected from people who could vote. He made them out and voted for the person he wanted to. Okay? Because that kind of thing happens with mail-in ballots, and everyone knows it.
Nope. That's a lie. That's not true.
No.
Well, Barr claims a man collected 1,700 ballots. First of all, we can't get people to vote once in America. We have the lowest voter turnout in the entire Western world. We can't get people to vote. You think this guy sat down and filled out 1,700 ballots? No. Federal prosecutors brought no such indictment. And what a Justice Department spokesman said Barr was referring to a local prosecution involving suspected mail-in voting fraud in a city council election. The assistant district attorney in that case said, no, doesn't mean. I mean, he just made up something that isn't possible to be true. We can't get people to vote once sometimes. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, look, everything William Barr says, Barr, Cohen's basically the same guy for Trump. It's all lie, and they want to destroy the entire voting process because they know that they cannot win in a fair and open election. But, Joy, here's the thing that I think is really important. We have to understand not just why they want to destroy the election, but the data behind it. If you look at Maine, if you look at Pennsylvania, if you look at North Carolina, it's not just that Democrats are almost getting a 2-to-1 request for mail-in ballots, right? And the key of mail-in ballots is you will have a paper trail. Unless you destroy them, there will be a paper trail. So Trump can't hide from the fact that you can actually just go through and count these by hand. 1 in 3 of the mail-in ballots being requested in Pennsylvania right now are from people who didn't vote in 2016. These are new people, and many of those are under 35 who are deciding, I'm going to get a mail-in ballot. I skipped out 2016, but I'm voting this guy out now. So their entire motivation is to destroy this process because you've got a whole new generation of Gen Z and initially disaffected generation millennials who are actually going to vote him out in 2020.
And you know, and also potentially maybe military members who are seeing what he said about their ranks and about our war dead. I want to play really quickly. This is a woman named Maisha Johnson. And those of you who watch a lot of cable news will remember that her husband was named LaDavid Johnson, and he died serving our country. And Donald Trump actually did call her. This is one of the rare cases where he called someone to supposedly give the condolences. It didn't go well. Here is Maisha Johnson.
The president said that he knew what he signed up for, but it hurts anyways. And it made me cry because I was very angry at the tone of his voice and how he said it. Like he couldn't remember my husband's name. And that would hurt me the most because if my husband is out here fighting for our country and he risks his life for our country, why can't you remember his name?
I mean, he couldn't remember his name when he made the phone call to the widow. So it's not like this information in the Atlantic, Charlie, was like shocking. Like, it's consistent with the way he's treated Khizr Khan and John McCain and on and on and on. I wonder if the accumulation now, plus messing with mail-in ballots, will mess with the military vote for people who are serving overseas. It's no wonder perhaps Donald Trump is panicking.
Well, this is a dangerous story for Donald Trump because it goes at the heart of his myth that somehow that he is a supporter of the military. Look, the reason why this is so dangerous for Donald Trump is because it is, as you just pointed out, so consistent what he has said publicly. His attacks on John McCain as a POW, his attacks on Gold Star parents like Khizr Khan and his wife, his bragging about avoiding sexually transmitted diseases as his own personal Vietnam. Look, here's the problem for a lot of Trump world and for the anti-Trumpers out there who are on the fence. If they believe this story, they have to confront the reality that the commander-in-chief of the United States is a small, vicious, petty, despicable man who dishonors everything he touches. And if they confront that reality, they're going to have to confront the choices that they are making right now, which is why there's so much energy being invested into denial. Don't believe it. Look the other way. Even though I have to tell you, they know in their hearts that it's true. They know this is who he is, but they have been in denial for a very, very long time. But we're within 60 days of this election, and we're seeing who Donald Trump is. And once again, he's told us over and over again who he is. A lot of people have chosen to ignore it, but it's coming back again at a crucial time.
You know, people, Jason, normally wake up from the Donald Trump cult of personality when it hits them personally. Michael Cohen is one of those guys who was the attack dog for Donald Trump for a long time. He was willing to get real nasty with Donald Trump's opponents. But then he found out, that Donald Trump has no loyalty, and he ended up going to jail after doing his bidding. Here was the Michael Cohen. This is a recent interview that he actually gave to our own Lester Holt. And this is a pretty scary thing he said, but I want to let you react to it.
Do you think he'll win another term as president?
So Donald Trump will do anything and everything within which to win. And I believe that includes manipulating the ballots. I believe that he would go so far as to start a war in order to prevent himself from being removed from office. My biggest fear is that there will not be a peaceful transition of power in 2020.
Jason, listen, it took a lot of bravery for people like John Lewis to take blows to the head in order to vote. It feels like it's going to take a lot of personal courage and people having to stand in lines with COVID out there, people having to overcome that fear. It's going to take a lot of determination. And I worry that sometimes the things that people say Donald Trump could do will make people scared. But what do you think is the balance right now of sort of voter courage versus voter fear?
So right before this segment, I was actually texting with friends of mine in North Carolina. I said, did you guys start today? It's early voting. They're like, we didn't know, because there are polling places around the corner from their house. We have to remember that a lot of the fear-mongering that Trump engages in, it's not what people are experiencing day in and day out. A lot of people, their polling place is close to them. It's someplace they can go to. So between that and the people asking for mail-in ballots, I think most people don't necessarily live in that fear. What I am most concerned about is not how people vote. It's the count afterwards. It's sending out Proud Boys and neo-Nazis and terrorists and all these white nationalists to polling stations to threaten the vote counters, to threaten the people who are supposed to be collecting the information. It's the manipulation from Russia or the White House after the fact. That is where I think that we should be really concerned. And again, I got to point back a little bit with Charlie. There are no persuadables at this point. There's no one who just woke up to this. Everybody knows Donald Trump is a bad guy. This election is purely about turnout. Can the Democrats get their people to vote and then get those votes fairly counted? Because there's not one person in America that heard that Donald Trump doesn't like the vets today. There's no one who heard that, he didn't remember LaDavid's name, man, woman, child, camera. The guy doesn't remember anything. He's never liked the military. It's just a matter of getting out the vote, because persuasion ended 4 years ago.
Well, the other thing that people know, Charlie, is they know what's in their pocketbook. There are a lot of people who it's not clear they're going to be able to vote because they've been evicted. And so it's not clear that they have an address with which to vote. There's a lot of people who just can't pay their bills right now, and that's their focus. Let's look at these jobs numbers. I mean, it is a catastrophe. We are at near 1930s levels of catastrophe, economic catastrophe. And it is shocking, I think, to a lot of people. I mean, you've dealt with these people on the radio that can take this kind of pain, this kind of agony and misery and humiliation. Donald Trump obviously doesn't even care about them, whether they live or die. He's like, come to my rally and get COVID. He doesn't care. I do wonder about whether people who are that sucked in and who are that sort of cultified, I wonder, like Jason, if there's any point in looking for persuadables. If you believe in this guy at this point, there's nothing that can take you away from him.
No, that's right. I mean, the cult is not persuadable. I completely agree with that. But I do think that there is a group of voters that is at least on the bubble. And as we get closer to this election, they are going to have to say, can we take 4 more years of this? Is America headed in the right direction? And I think it's the accumulation of everything you've been talking about. And Joy, I think you also asked a crucial question, all of this fear-mongering. Does it dissuade, does it frighten people, or does it motivate people? I think it's going to motivate people. And also, in terms of voting, by raising all the questions and the doubt about the count, I think it's going to make people be much more conscientious, much more careful about how they go through all of this. Right. So I do think this will backfire. I also think there's a chance that he might suppress his own vote. But in terms of persuadable, look, I think that as you get closer to the election, you have a very small number of people who may be undecided, and historically they break against the incumbent. And right now, I think those are the voters who are looking around. And I think only in the last week have they seen how dramatic the contrast it is between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I mean, what an amazing split screen we got in Kenosha, Wisconsin this week. And I think that contrast is going to be front and center for a lot of voters who might not have been paying that close of attention. And so I do think that there's going to be a group of voters who are going to go into that ballot box and are going to make a decision, much closer to the election than most of us who have lived this for the last 4 years would like to think.
And Jason, there's those voters, and then there's the black church lady vote. I always say, if you want to know, anything about black politics, find a lady with a church hat, and if she owns more than one church hat, you want to vote like her, because that's the lady who usually votes the right way. You said a long time ago when we were talking about this over on AM Joy that Joe Biden is sort of the perfect candidate for this, and this was before Joe Biden was viable. And you said because old white guy. Non-threatening. You can take him to the suburbs and say, look at him. He's like your Uncle Joe. And he's also hard to redefine because he's Uncle Joe already, and you can't redefine him. So it looks like that is turning out to be the case. I mean, at least what you've seen in his presentation, it seems pretty effective.
Yeah, enjoy. You know, we talked about them, the seasoned citizens, right?
Yes.
You notice Joe Biden's doing really, really well with seniors, right? Because he speaks to these people. He gives a sense of safety. And here's the thing, and this is sort of digging down as the political scientist. The only persuasion is between voting and not voting. It's not who you're going to vote for. Right? That's the key that Democrats have to remember. The 55 to 70-year-old African-American woman, she's already voting, and she got her son, and she got her nephew, and she got her husband. They're already voting. The people that you're worried about are the Gen Xers like myself and the millennials who may be disenchanted, who may be frustrated. You've got to make sure those people turn out to vote because they already know they're not going to vote for Trump. Those people only exist in the minds of Democratic consultants because they've been chasing after this mythical, persuadable Republican in the suburbs for 25 years who doesn't exist. Donald Trump recognizes that, which is why his entire Republican convention was not about persuading. It was about turning out his base while at the same time destroying mailboxes so the Democrats can't vote.
Oh, it's going to be an interesting election. Jason Johnson, Charlie Sykes, two of my favorite people to talk about this stuff. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend. And up next on the Readout, my conversation with the president's niece, Mary Trump. What were his thoughts before he got into politics and needed their votes about religious people, about Christians?
He doesn't have any. He has no connection to religion or faith that I'm aware of. You know, he's quite good at finding what, in his words, he would call suckers.
I promise you, I did not plan to wear the same color again. There's that word again, suckers. To Donald Trump, religious people, soldiers, anyone who puts their faith in something bigger than the almighty dollar is, in fact, a sucker. And Yusef Salaam, one of the